All right, Noel, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
Sure, absolutely, Alex. So, yeah, I'm Noall Silvester. I currently work as a regional vice president of operations for Aimbridge Hospitality. I oversee a portfolio of about 20 hotels spread sort of between Texas and North Carolina and stretching up between Texas and Wisconsin to the north. I've been with Aimbridge for about 10 years and sort of came to Aimbridge following a GM opportunity that they provided and grew in my position there to an area GM and a regional director of
Awesome.
operations and uh, and into this regional VP role. So prior to that, I spent about 12 years with Hilton Hotels Corporation, um, just through a variety of positions in advance. Kind of moved around the country with them and got to open a couple of hotels and sort of went up through the front office and front office management track. So I've been in the industry now for about 22 years and it's been great.
Yeah, man. I mean, just even looking at your LinkedIn, it's so polished. It's great. You have such a great background. And I guess, like diving right in then, Noel, is like, the first big question I like to ask everyone is like, in your role, like what do you see are like the three biggest roadblocks or problems that you see in hospitality within your remit today?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Straight in.
Yeah, roadblocks, I would say, I think as an industry, we are all facing the reality of the talent deficit and the labor force kind of macro issues that are impacting a lot of industries, but particularly hospitality and tourism. So it's very competitive to find talented people and very difficult in some situations. In my world, I have hotels that are in larger metropolitan areas like Houston, and I have some that are in very small areas where the population of a community may be 7,000 people or 10,000 people. And so to recruit talent in those sort of markets presents a challenge. Um, I think also understanding ownership expectations and the reality is with this talent shortage we've talked about and the economy, there's a lot of opportunities for people that out there, and there's been intense wage growth and overall expense growth from linens to food to everything else, and our revenue has not grown to the same proportion as those expenses have. So that's created a really difficult operating environment for the hotels and difficult profitability environment for ownership groups. So that's another roadblock. And geez, I don't know. I don't know if you were to ask a third. uh, if I could if I could figure out those first two things in my group, I'd be in pretty good shape. But um, you know, just keeping keeping in touch with the team. Taking opportunities to make sure you're giving people the support that they need. And well, they're still operating on fairly lean, uh, you know, payroll models and expense models in their hotels.
Yeah, I mean it's so fair, and and also just to like clarify, I mean like I've done about 13 of these podcast episodes in the last 10 days, and
Mm.
it's primarily all hotel managers, hotel operators, and resort operators, and every single one of them is like number one priority is like staffing and getting the right staff in. And it's interesting because as I lean more and more into listening to more and more operators in, I just say accommodation providers, because I've been talking to restaurant people for the last 18 months, but
Mhm.
it's very much case of like, not just like finding like bodies, like warm bodies to put in, because guest experience is even more of a premium in a hotel environment than probably even in a restaurant, because you're in a restaurant for an hour and a half, you're in a hotel for a day, 2 days, a bit longer. And it's like, how do you move that staff around? And there's so many different types of staff within the hotel that it's like nailing that guest experience is even more important with the type of staff you have and putting a greater onus on the quality of staff that you bring in. Do you see any sort of like emerging trends in the hiring of your sort of hourly staff say since post-COVID, for example?
I mean, you've observed well from your conversations, and all of the service expectations of our guests are returning to normal. I mean, we're sort of done comparing. Forever we've been comparing ourselves to 2019, and there was all this conversation about, okay, let's go back to what things were like pre-COVID, and what did the environment look like, what did service look like, et cetera, et cetera. And we're sort of done talking about that, which has been good, because there's been new normals established in everything, operating models and everything we kind of talked about. So emerging trends with team members that come in, boy, I tell you what, if you don't onboard somebody properly and you don't give them the support and sort of a pathway forward, you're not going to keep people. People are much less willing to put up with poor work environments, with poor management, no upward mobility, because there are a lot of options for people, in our industry and out of our industry. So, I think people tend to be a little less loyal than they used to. And so again, it makes it important for us to sort of make sure that from the time those people set through the foot through the door, we're really creating realistic expectations of what they can expect and providing them support all along the way. Because if you don't, they just won't stay. And those trends of you hire 3 people and maybe one of them stays, and that we're seeing that kind of widespread all across the country. Like I said, I think I've got hotels in 8 or 9 states, and it's everywhere. So just the real importance of creating a culture that people want to come to work in, where you're taking care of them, but also holding them accountable for good and for bad, recognizing what they're doing well, coaching them along the way is just so important. Because 10, 15 years ago, you can kind of draw a harder line on some of that stuff. And you have to do that still, because our guest service expectations are back to normal, as I said, and the rates they're paying are back to normal. So you have to provide that experience, but it's definitely been a little bit more challenging to do with the current workforce that's coming to our hotels.
It's interesting that you mentioned how critical the onboarding is. And I say that in the sense that you're the first person I've spoken to that's dialed in that as like a key factor. A lot of people talk about the process of retention in terms of processes and programs while you have them and try to maintain in them. But it's interesting that you've leaned into the onboarding. Is that somewhere that you've isolated yourself as you have either metrics or anecdotal evidence within your sort of background that that nailing that onboarding is what gets you the type of employees for life?
Yeah, and to be honest, we've got a lot of good resources at the company I work for now. With that, we have a good support team, but I think over time we've all realized the importance of just from the very beginning. Yes, retention is very important. Of course, that's the overall goal, but it all starts with the day they walk in the hotel. So making sure we've got a very clear path of expectations, a very clear path of trainings that need to be taken care of, tools, resources, so that you can sort of set somebody up for success in the beginning. Obviously, that's how the whole retention process starts, is during that recruiting process.
And it's interesting, you mentioned, you're mentioning the word retention as well, and giving people, managing the expectations of people coming in. Has there been a change, you think, between say pre-COVID expectations and post-COVID expectations of employees? And is there a generational gap, or what do you see as the sort of change in expectations pre and post-COVID?
Yeah, there's a lot there in that question.
Yeah.
One gentleman I'll reference that I've heard speak at a couple of times. There's a gentleman that I think he's based in Austin. His name is Jason Dorsey, and his organization studies the way the different generations interact in the workplace. And, over time, as generations seem to shrink in a number of years, we have more and more generations in the workplace. And, I think you and I could talk about that for a long time, but yes, with the economy, again, some people are kind of unsure about that. We have an older workforce in some of our hotels than we historically have seen pre-COVID. And we do have multiple generations of team members there. So, you've got some older baby boomers, you've got some Gen Xers that are kind of in your levels. We've got you just got everybody. And yeah, the expectations of somebody that, maybe is younger, that's coming into the industry, that they're all about career opportunities and growth and, validation and becoming a part of something that's larger versus, somebody who's older that may be joining for, an opportunity to connect socially and just engage their mind, versus somebody else who's here, for the money, which most of us that work in hospitality don't. We don't enter this industry for financial benefits. But you have to really understand those expectations and the motivational factors for why people are coming to work, and do your best to sort of customize their experience to what their expectations are.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's interesting. I'd say great to hear you articulate that. Again, like I said, I haven't heard people really speak to that kind of point. And I think I'm getting a great flavor of loads of different sort of operators of hotels, and everyone has great opinions and great takes. But it is fascinating to me to think that at the end of the day, because I had a call actually, and somebody was like, it's all about pay. I mean, they'll go work in Chick-fil-A if they want to go to work in Chick-fil-A, for example. If they want great benefits, great perks, and they'll get paid in Chick-fil-A. And I'm like, yeah, is it though? I mean, I feel when I speak to someone like you with your years of experience, and you've very much got you understand the culture of working in hospitality. I know that your goal, if I'm speaking for you, is to engender that type of culture amongst all of the people who report to you, so that they can try and get a fulfilling career within hospitality, similar to yourself, I presume. And that's the kind of culture you're trying to engender. Would that be right in thinking that?
Yeah. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And so many people like that. I mean, and it's amazing to see, because it's not like, I've been working in technology for 15 years, and honestly, if somebody wanted to do what I do, I'd be like, sure, go for it. I don't know if I'm very much enthusiastic about it myself. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I guess on that topic, where it's trying to find those right people that you can help groom and help kind of grow and evolve into kind of more leadership positions internally. Do you think what's your take on the job market? Because you kind of alluded to it.
Yeah. You mean in terms of just
hospitality? Yeah, I mean in terms of hospitality, I mean, obviously you could reference inflation and how it's you mentioned the cost of linen, for example, but specifically finding the talent you need. How do you look at the job market for hospitality? Are we healthy? Or whatever your take is?
Yeah. It's been an understanding things again from an ownership perspective, and a lot of the 90% of the hotels, I think, I don't know the exact statistic, but call it 85-90% of hotels are franchised hotels. So an ownership group is paying to use Marriott or Hilton's name, and they might hire a management company, and so there's a lot of different players involved there. So you kind of got to understand and balance the needs of everybody to the best of your ability. But yeah, in terms of job market, and finding people that are willing to sort of come in and do what they need to do to find opportunities for advancement. I mean, there are some really, really great people coming to work in this industry, because if you polled general managers, and maybe this has changed over time, but there's a large portion of them that some have college degrees, some don't, there's a very large portion of them that came to work and started out doing something that you'd never think would turn into a career that has. So, I joined as an airline crew driver, while I was working part-time going to college. And again, I never thought it would turn into a career, and it has, and it's been great. But my story's not that unique. I mean, you find, people that start as bellmen or front desk agents or whatever. And
Yeah.
so, finding people that are willing to come in and sort of start at the ground and work their way up and do their time, that's a little bit of a struggle with the younger generation. Sometimes they may want to advance more quickly than they're ready for. But by the same token, like, our industry just provides, like, if you're willing to move and you're willing to, take on extra responsibilities, you can advance very quickly. And there's opportunities for those individuals.
Yeah, it's great that you say that. I mean, definitely of all the non-restaurant folks I've been speaking to lately, like people who work in entertainment, like venues, people who are running hotels, there seems to be like almost like the thread that seems to me is that, like, if you're able to do like a nighttime gig or a weekend gig and being able to do it, like be a night auditor in a hotel or be the guy who closes up the venue at 5 o'clock in the morning, that type of like team player attitude is what cuts the wheat from the chaff when it comes to hospitality. I feel like I've heard that from like so many people, that if you're able to you can find somebody who's willing to do that, then you really have a good marker for somebody that you can really like try and like I said, groom into a really good position and like really kind of help them evolve and train them. Is that something that you'd subscribe to as well, or subscribe to?
Yeah. There's 2 or 3 kind of rules for success in this industry, I would, that I kind of live by, and
Yep.
over time kind of see what leads people to be successful. And yeah, one of those is being willing to do what other people aren't. And whether that is the stuff you mentioned, like stepping up and doing a shift on a Sunday, overnight, that nobody wants to do. If you're at a concert venue, or move to the middle of nowhere to take over a hotel that's, is not in great physical shape and has other challenges, or just or take on responsibilities you may not fully be ready for. But stepping in and doing some of those things that people kind of shy away from definitely helps you differentiate yourself as a candidate. 100%.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then, like I hear it's like I get the impression I hear all the time, because like as much as the product that I sell technically is like a recruitment software, it's interesting to hear that whether you're in entertainment, you're in hotels, resorts, or restaurant, that there is very much a true for some, relevant for all kind of issue, which is like finding good people, because you're in the business of people, and like it sounds to me like that you very much like found your pattern for like figuring out how to find these quality people and groom them properly. I found it very interesting you're talking about like onboarding as a specific kind of area that you like to zero in on, because I hear from other people that's like, how do we think about like the processes for the retention is an area for other like kind of operators to focus on. So I loved hearing you talk about this. I guess like, as a final question, it's like, what advice would you give to like somebody who is like coming in that wanted to like kind of scale up the ranks in, a kind of large kind of corporate hotel chain, or from a small hotel into, like as a stepping stone? Like, what would be the kind of advice you'd give somebody?
Good question. Yeah, listen, if I was to sit down with, one of my team members that expressed a desire to advance and grow, I think I would, the point we just talked about is true
Yeah.
for anybody. Like, if you be willing to do what other people don't want to, whether that's like extra side jobs, or, asking what else you can take on, just being willing to do what other people aren't. I would say also, in our industry in hospitality, if you're willing to relocate, there will never be a shortage of opportunities for you.
Yeah.
So, willingness to relocate is very, very important. And also, you're never fully going to be sometimes we hesitate to apply for or move into another job. I guess this is kind of a two-part suggestion. Number one is the time for you to prove that you're ready for a promotion as well before that job ever opens.
Yeah.
When you're doing some of these other things in advance, you definitely differentiate yourself. But by the same token, it's okay to jump in and not know exactly how to do everything. And sometimes you have to do that. You got to be willing to sort of, take that leap of faith, so to speak, and say, okay, I know what I know, and I know I'll be able to figure this out eventually. And I may not have all the answers, but I'm still going to step into this growth opportunity. So, kind of willingness to relocate, willingness to do what other people can't or won't. Taking time to prove you're ready for a job before it opens, and then just understanding, you're never fully ready. It's kind of like when you open a new restaurant or hotel. Sometimes you just got to open it and work out the bugs as you go.
Totally. And I mean, like you said, the advice is applicable to anything. It's just like, get going, get started, and just put an honest effort into what you want to do.